When this chick and me broke up, I still stayed friends with her brother, which is unusual in cases like that. Charlie, the bartender, was just 22, but he had a tough reputation and kept order real good. We lived in kind of a rough part of town, and some pretty wild things went on in Charlie's bar. I looked around for a couple of plainclothes cops when we went in. I could always tell a cop, but didn't find one, so I went up to the bar and hopped on a bar stool. "Give me a beer," I said, and Charlie, who was good cleaning glasses just like every bartender you ever see, gave me a dirty look and said, "Okay," I said brightly, "a Coke." "Your credit ain't so hot, Brian," Charlie said. "You got cash? A dime? For crying out loud, can't you let me charge a dime Coke? Cokes are 15 cents, and you already got $3 worth of Cokes charged here. And if you don't pay up this month, I'll have to beat it out of you." He said this real friendly-like, but he meant it. We were friends, but Charlie was a businessman, too. "I'll pay up," I assured him. "Don't worry." Charlie gave me a lopsided grin. "I ain't worried, kid. You're the one who should be worried." I was, to tell you the truth. Charlie was a big, tough guy, so a $3 beating up was something to worry about. "Hey, Mark," Charlie called. "There ain't nobody here to hustle." Mark, who had been scouting out the two guys playing pool, came up and sat down next to me. "Yeah, that's the truth." "Repeat yourself," I said. "You guys are going to get in real bad trouble one of these days. Some guy's going to get passed off when he finds out what you're doing, and you're going to get a pool sheet rammed down your throat." "No, he ain't," said Mark. "You can't cope, Charlie." "We don't have any credit," I said gloomily. Mark stared at Charlie disbelievingly. "You gotta be kidding. Man, when did we ever not pay our bill?" "Last month. You said you'd add it on to this month." "That's what you said, so I don't see why you can't add 20 cents to that." 30 cents, corrected Charlie. "And like I just told Brian, if I don't get that money pretty soon, I'm going to take it out of a couple of ties. I'll get you the money tomorrow if you give us a Coke right now." "Okay." Charlie gave in to Mark. Almost everybody does. It was a gift he had, a gift for getting away with things. He could talk anyone into anything. "But if I don't get the money by tomorrow, I'll come looking for you." I got chilled. I had heard Charlie say that to another guy once. I also saw the guy after Charlie found him. But if Mark said he'd have $3 by tomorrow, he'd have it. "Speaking of looking for you," Charlie continued, "the true flower child was in here asking for you." "M&M?" Mark asked. "What did he want?" "How would I know? Man, that was a weird kid. Nice guy, but weird." "Yeah," Mark said. "I guess it would be hard to be a hippie in a hood part of town." "Speak for yourself, man," Charlie said. "This part of town don't make nobody a hood." "You're right," Mark said, "but I really sounded profound there for a minute, huh?" Charlie just gave him a funny look and got us the Coke. It was later in the evening now, and some more customers came in. So Charlie quit talking to us. It got pretty busy. "Where are you going to get $3? I asked Mark. He finished off his Coke. "I don't know." That bugged the heck out of me. Mark was always pulling stunts like that. I ought to know. Mark had lived at my house ever since I was 10, he was 9, and his parents shot each other in a drunken argument, and my old lady felt sorry for him and took him home to live with us. My mother wanted 100 kids and could only have one, so until she got hold of Mark, she had to be content feeding every stray cat that came along. There was no telling how many kids she might have picked up along the line if she could afford more than 2, me and Mark. I had been friends with Mark long before he came to live with us. He had lived down the street, and it seemed to me that we had always been together. We had never had a fight, we had never had an argument, and look, we were complete opposites. I'm a big guy, dark hair and eyes, the kind who looks like a St. Bernard puppy, which I don't mind, as most chicks cannot resist a St. Bernard puppy. Mark was small and compact, with strange golden eyes and hair to match and a grin like a friendly lion. He was much stronger than he looked. He could tie me in arm wrestling. He was my best friend, and we were like brothers. "Let's go look for M&M, Mark said abruptly, and we left. It was dark outside and seemed a little chilly. This was probably because school had just started, and it always seemed like fall when school starts, even if it's hot. Charlie's bar was on a real crummy street, with a lot of other bars, whose bartenders kicked us out when we strolled in. A movie house, a drugstore, and a second-hand clothes store that always had a sign in the window saying, "We buy almost anything." And from the looks of their clothes, they did. When my old lady went to the hospital, we got so low on money that I bought some clothes there. It's pretty lousy buying used clothes. We found M&M in the drugstore reading Newsweek, which shows what a weird kid he was, since there were plenty of skin mags and things to read. A little kid like that shouldn't be reading that junk, I know, but he should at least want to. "Hey, Charlie." "Hey, Charlie said you was looking for us." Mark greeted him. M&M looked up at him. "Yeah, how you guys doing?" M&M was the most serious guy I knew. He always had the wide-eyed, intense, trusting look on his face, but sometimes he smiled, and when he did, it was really great. He was an awful nice kid, even if he was a little strange. He had big gray eyes, the kind you see on War Orphan posters, and charcoal-colored hair down past his ears and down to his eyebrows. He probably would have grown a beard, except 13 was too young for it. He always wore an old army jacket that was too big for him and went barefoot even after it started getting cold. Then his father got fed up with it, and M&M got a pair of moccasins. He had a metal peace symbol hanging around his neck on a piece of rawhide string, and he got his nickname from his addiction to M&M, the kind of coated candy that melts in your mouth and not in your hand. For years, I'd never seen M&M without a bag of that candy. I don't know how he ate those things all day long, day after day. If I did that, my face would break out like nothing you've ever seen. Kendra, go back up to your seat, please. Okay. Tyrell, go back to your seat.
What did I do?
Go back to your seat, please, so we can continue.
We'll continue on anyway.
Yeah? You want M&M? He held out a bag toward us. I shook my head, but Mark took one just to be polite, since he didn't like sweet stuff. You wanted to see us for something, Mark reminded him. Yeah, I did, but I forgot what for. He was like that, real absent-minded. My sister's home, he added as an afterthought. No kids? After Mark tactfully thumbing through a Playboy. Which one? M&M had a million brothers and sisters, most of them younger. They all looked alike, and it was really funny to see him out somewhere with 4 or 5 little carbon copies, with dark hair and big serious eyes, hanging all over him. If I had to be a babysitter day and night, I'd lose my temper and kill one of those brats. Yes, and then that's your last chance. Otherwise, it's to the office with a needle.
What did I do?
Because you're disrupting us trying to read. Some people are trying to listen because you're going to have homework on.
I didn't want to do that.
My older sister, Kathy, you know. Yeah, I remember, I said, only I didn't remember too well. Where's she been? She went to a private school last year and this summer. She's been staying with my aunt. She had to come home, though, because she ran out of money. She paid for it all with her own bread. Must be smart, I said. I couldn't remember what she looked like. I never paid any attention to her. She as smart as you? No, M&M said, still reading. He wasn't bragging, he was telling the truth. He was a very honest kid. Let's go over to the bowling alley, Mark suggested. The drugstore wasn't exactly jumping with action. It was a school night, nobody was hanging around. You come too, man. It was a long walk to the bowling alley, and I wished for the 100th time I had a car. I had to walk everywhere I went. As if he read my mind, which he was in the habit of doing, Mark said, I could hotwire us a car. That's a bad thing to do, M&M said, taking something that doesn't belong to you. It ain't stealing, Mark said. It's borrowing. Yeah, well, you're on probation now for borrowing, so I don't think it's such a great idea, I said. Mark could hotwire anything. Never since he was 12 years old, he had hotwired cars and driven them. He had never had an accident, but he finally got caught at it. So now once a week he had to go downtown to school lunch hour to see his probation officer and tell him how he was never going to steal cars anymore. I had been worried at first, afraid they were going to take Mark and put him in a boys' home, since he wasn't really my brother and didn't have a family. I was worried about Mark being locked up. I didn't need to. Mark always came through everything untouched, unworried, unaffected. Okay, Mark shrugged. Don't get shook, Brian. Brian, M&M said suddenly, were you named after the Lord? What? I said stunned. For a minute I thought he meant God. Lord Brian, were you named after him? The poor kid had Byron and Brian mixed up. I decided to string him along. Yeah, I was. Was there a Lord Brian? Mark said. Hey, that's cool. He paused. I guess it's cool. What's this guy do anyway? Can't tell you in front of the kid, I answered. M&M shook his head. He wrote poetry. He wrote long, old poems. You ought to write poetry just to keep up the tradition of the Bryans. You ought to keep your mouth shut, I replied, before I keep up the tradition of punching wise guys in the mouth. M&M looked up at me, and I realized from his hurt, puzzled look that he hadn't been trying to be smart. So I punched him on the shoulder and said, okay, I'll write poetry. How's this? And I recited a dirty limerick I'd heard somewhere. It made him laugh and turn red at the same time. Mark thought I had made it up and said, hey, that was pretty good. Can you just pop them off like that? I only shrugged and said, sometimes, because then I'd take credit whether or not it was really due me. I was like that. I'd also lie if I really thought I could get away with it, especially to girls, like telling them I loved them and junk when I didn't. I had a rep as a lady killer, a hustler. I kept up the old Lord Byron tradition in one way. Sometimes I'd get to feeling bad thinking about how rotten I treated some of these chicks, but most of the time it didn't even bother me. Eminem, old buddy, Mark was saying, putting his arm across Eminem's shoulders. I was wondering if you might be able to loan your best friend some money. You ain't my best friend, Eminem said with that disarming honesty. But how much do you want? $3. I got 50 cents. Eminem reached into his jeans pocket and pulled out a couple of quarters. Here. Forget it, I said. Me and Mark looked at each other and shook our heads. Eminem was unbelievable. It's okay, I'll get 50 cents again next week for babysitting.
Oh, that one. I don't know. Bro. What happened?
I was trying to tell him what page it was on, but he wasn't listening.
18.
Oh, wow.
Is that all you get paid for? Watching all those kids? 50 cents? I couldn't get over it. 50 cents a week. I think it's enough. I don't mind taking care of the kids. Who's going to do it if I don't? Both my parents work, so they can't do it. Anyway, I love my family. When I get married, I'm going to have at least 9 or 10 kids. There goes the population explosion, Mark said. Well, now that your sister's home, she can do a lot of babysitting, I said, trying to be helpful. Eminem could tell we thought he was crazy. Kathy's got a job after school. She can't help. I don't know what I have to do to convince you that I don't mind it. Okay, I'm convinced. I was also tired of the subject and had got to worrying about how we're going to get $3 before tomorrow. Charlie didn't get his rough rep or his bar by being nice to people, especially ones who couldn't pay their bills.
Shut up.
Move your desk to that spot. I know it's hilarious, so move your desk to that spot.
I already talked about this.
Yeah,
Look,
pull
wait
it.
now.
Pull.
Hey, John, you mend it.
Pull.
How would you pull it? Look at the hose. I just went from, oh my God.
By the time we got to the bowling alley, it was 10 o'clock. There weren't many people there. Mark and I watched a few games while Eminem stared into a package of M&Ms. I finally got bugged out about it and asked him what was